Hi everyone, my name is Madison Worthington and I am a graduate student at the University of Georgia studying ruminant nutrition. Today I'll be talking about bloat and some ways to prevent bloat within your herd. This topic is important to me because bloat is one of the leading problems for Georgia producers and is a topic that should be fully understood in order to prevent it. So what is bloat? Ruminal bloat is characterized by an accumulation of gas in the rumen that is produced during the natural fermentation process and is unable to escape. So if you look over to the picture to my left, you'll see the rumen and the food that is being digested during that fermentation process. There's a gas bubble at the top that is a byproduct of that fermentation. Typically, cattle will get rid of this gas by eructating the gas up, but during bloat, they're unable to do so. And I'll go into a little further detail about that in a few other slides. But what are some symptoms of bloat or some signs of bloat? Usually your animals will have a loss of appetite and they'll no longer be grazing. Your animals will be reluctant to move. You'll also see a swollen left abdomen on your animals, and that's due to the gas buildup in their rumen. They'll have a staggering gait. The animals will appear distressed, uncomfortable. They'll usually be more vocal. They'll have a more frequent urination and defecation cycle. They'll have more rapid breathing with tongues protruding. Some animals will collapse, and in extreme cases, death can occur. So, what are some types of bloat? There are actually two types of bloat: free gas bloat and frothy bloat. Free gas bloat is the less common type and usually occurs in feedlot animals that are fed a high grain diet. Free gas bloat is usually caused by an obstruction of the esophagus or cardia in your animal, which inhibits the animal to eructate and release that gas that is a natural byproduct of the fermentation process that occurs in the rumen. It usually occurs very rapidly and has a very high mortality rate. Frothy bloat is the more common type of bloat and occurs in animals that are grazing on rich and lush legume pastures that contain alfalfa or clover. The soluble proteins in alfalfa or clover cause the accumulation of a stable foam in the rumen that traps those gases that are given off during the natural fermentation process. Due to this entrapment of the gases, the animal is unable to eructate those gases back up, and a buildup of pressure inside the rumen typically occurs and causes a bloat. Throughout the next few slides, I'll be discussing different prevention strategies that have been formulated during research studies that specifically target bloat. So the first preventative strategy that I'm going to talk to you about is the stage of growth of the plants that are growing in your pasture that your animals are grazing on. Research studies have shown that plants that have a higher level of maturity, so plants that are in the blooming phase, like in the picture that I've attached to this slide, have a decreased incident rate of bloat than plants that are in that early vegetative state. So basically, you want to turn your cattle out on a pasture that has more mature plants than a pasture that has early vegetative plants or plants that are just beginning to grow. So what these results indicate is that managing bloat through a selection of plant phenology has the potential to decrease bloat throughout your herd. So the next preventative strategy I'll be talking to you about is the use of AC grazeland. Studies have been conducted where they elucidated the chemical and morphological features of legumes and studied the features that do and do not cause bloat. It was determined that alfalfa has a potential to decrease bloat by studying its initial rate of digestion. So this new alfalfa cultivar, AC Grazeland, has a lower initial rate of digestion, and that was measured in the study by an in situ nylon bag technique. This AC Grazeland reduced bloat in a herd by an average of 56% in grazing cattle. The efficiency of AC Grazeland in reducing bloat can also be further enhanced by using an ionophore such as monensin. The third strategy to prevent bloat was through the use of feed additives such as poloxaline, which is also known as bloat guard. Studies have shown that if poloxaline has been given at the exact prescribed dose intraruminally, it has been 100% effective in preventing bloat. However, this method of adding a bloat guard can be very expensive and it must be fed daily, so it can be kind of aggravating and time consuming, so it's not always the best method. A more effective approach could be using anti-bloating agents, and you could administer them through a water supply. This would allow a uniform and rapid dispersal of the agent throughout the rumen. There is a product known as Bloat 4511 that's available in New Zealand, but unfortunately it's not yet available in North America. As you can see in the table on the right, the blow care was very effective in reducing bloat and can be used as a preventative method for reducing bloat. However, it's not available in the U.S., but hopefully it will become a viable option for cattle producers here in the United States in the coming years. The fourth prevention strategy would be through diet manipulation. Research has shown that using non-bloating legumes such as sainfoin in grazing pastures has reduced the risk of bloat in cattle herds. Sainfoin has endogenous chemical and morphological features that render it digestible in the rumen without causing rapid fermentation and that excessive gas production that is conducive to that foam formulation in the rumen. So unlike alfalfa or clover, sainfoin contains high levels of condensed tannins. Tannins are polyphenolic polymers that are able to interact with feed, microbial, and plant proteins. So those soluble proteins that come from alfalfa or clover, they are able to interact with those proteins and break up that foam that could form in the rumen and cause bloat. So according to the figures shown on the right that I got from a research study, it shows that sainfoin does not eliminate bloat, but is more effective in reducing bloat in cattle that are grazing spring vegetative alfalfa than cattle that are grazing in regrowth pastures. So if you want to graze your cattle on a pasture that has early vegetative life, which does have a higher risk of bloat, this could be a good option for you to use. Swathing and wilting is another preventative method that you can use to avoid bloat in your cattle herd. Alfalfa silage is virtually bloat-free, and that's owed in part to the protein degradation that occurs due to proteolysis in the silage process. So wilting alfalfa for 24 hours also produces changes in protein configuration, and this is due by the increase of the sulfhydryl and disulfide content that alfalfa proteins have. So if you look on the right, the table indicates that wilting a swath for 24 to 48 hours significantly reduced the incidence of alfalfa bloat and was totally eliminated after a 48-hour wilt that was conducted later in later trials. This was due in part to they cut the swath way later in the season, so that reduced the moisture content of the swath by 30%. And that also helped to eliminate the bloat in their herd. The last bloat preventing strategy that I'll be discussing is to use a continuous and uninterrupted feeding regimen. The key is to promote a continuous and rapid turnover of the rumen. This will help to prevent distortions of the natural process of microbial fermentation that will increase gas formation and reduce rumen bypass. When you're shifting your cattle from a pen to a pasture, it's essential to adapt these cattle to a continuous grazing system where the intake is gradual and unimpeded. This will help you to reduce bloat. Studies show that using about a 3-day adaptation period to continuous grazing on a grass pasture would be desirable before turning your cattle out onto an alfalfa pasture. Studies also show that turning your cattle out in the afternoon would help to eliminate bloat as well, because it doesn't have that high moisture rate that your morning pasture may have due to that dew content. I hope this talk about bloat and some prevention strategies was very helpful and informative. Thank you for listening and have a great day.